In this video, we are going to be building our wooden Christmas tree. And I will tell you, these are very inexpensive to build, and they're great sellers. Of course, closer to Christmas, they're great sellers. But actually, I've sold these Christmas trees all throughout the year. So don't be afraid to make one, post it, and you might be surprised. You might sell them dead in the middle of July. I will say this, the plans are available at $5plans.com. And they're $5, and we give you the dimensions and plans for 3 different size trees. The one that we're going to be building today is our most commonly sold tree, and that is the 5-foot version. But we also have a 6.5-foot version and a 3.5-foot version. Okay, and all those plans for all 3 trees will come in the set. I am not going to be focusing a whole lot on every specific dimension. There are tons of branches, tons of parts and pieces. So your best bet is to spend the $5 and get you the set of plans. Now, other projects you could probably get by with just the video, but in this case, there's lots of dimensions and lots of pieces. So I just think having a set of plans is going to be best for you. Plus, having the set of plans, we've got the cut list all made out for you. So it's real simple to get all your parts cut on the minimum amount of material. Now, this project calls for 6 fence pickets. And then down here, there's just a couple of pieces of 2x4. So you can use scraps if you have it in your shop. You could use 2x3s as well. But otherwise, you would need 1 2x4. Now, the center post on the 3.5-foot and our 5-foot tree here, the center is a piece of electrical conduit. So we're using 1/2-inch electrical conduit. On the 2 smaller trees, the big 6.5-footer, we use 3/4-inch conduit. Okay, so you will need a piece of conduit. Now they do sell the conduit in 5-foot lengths and 10-foot lengths. We need a 5-foot length, obviously, for our 5-foot tree. But I would buy a 10-foot length and just cut it in half, because the 5-foot length costs almost as much as a 10-foot length, oddly. All right. So with that said, that's basically what we're going to need. Now, what we're going to do first is we're going to rip our fence pickets. So the very bottom branch here is 4 inches wide, and then as we go up, 3.5 inches wide, 3 inches wide, 2.5 inches wide, 2 inches wide, and at the very top, they're only 1.5 inches wide. So they get gradually thinner as we go up. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 2 fence pickets and rip them down to 4 inches wide. And then we need a 3.5-inch wide one. And then we need a 3-inch wide one. And then the rest of them are all 2.5 inches wide. And I'll explain that as we go along, even though I just said the top branches were 1.5. We want to rip our fence pickets to 2.5, and like I said, once we get to that point, I'll explain why we're going to do that. All right. So with all that said, let me get my fence pickets ripped first. So again, we're going to take 6 fence pickets total. So 2 are 4, 1 3.5, 1 3, and then the rest are all 2.5. Okay. So let me get that done, and then I'll come back and we'll move on to the next step here. Okay, so we have all of our pieces ripped, and I just want to go over what we're going to use, what we're not using. So we have our 2 4-inch pieces here, and then 1 3.5-inch piece, 1 3-inch wide piece, and then we have 4 pieces that are 2.5 inches wide. Okay, now over here are our cutoffs. These 2 thin ones are the cutoffs from our 4-inch piece, and so these are not going to be used in this project. But do not throw those away, because we have other projects where this material can be used in those projects. Okay, so and likewise with this thinner piece here, we're not going to use this either. This was the cutoff from our 3.5-inch wide strip. Okay, but now the cutoff from our 3-inch strip, we are going to use that. Okay, because it's very nearly 2.5 inches wide. It's not quite, but it's very nearly so. So we can use that. All right. So with that said, our next step are to make donuts. And this is kind of the most tedious part of this project, is making the donuts. So I'll get them made. I'll explain how we're doing it along the way, and I'll show you, here in a bit, the purpose of those donuts and how we're going to use them. So we need 50 donuts, and so I'm going to go ahead and get this kind of prepped up a little bit, and then we'll talk more about what the donut actually is. Okay, so what we have here is we have the board that was part of our 3-inch cutoff. So this is the cutoff from our 3-inch wide picket. And what I've done here is I've started down here at the bottom, and every 2 inches, I mark every 2 inches, okay? All the way up the board. Now this is going to very nearly give us enough donuts, but some of these donuts, there's a little knot in the wood here, so some of these donuts may not actually pan out. The wood sometimes has a tendency to split, whatever the case might be. So we will need this whole board and probably half of another one. But I built so many of these trees, I'll go through and just do 2 whole strips of donuts, and then I'll have leftover donuts for the next tree. So at any rate, so all we're going to do is we're going to take this 3/4 inch bit here, this paddle bit. Now I bought this at Home Depot, and it's got that big auger tip on the front. And if we use a board that's less than 2.5, like if we used a 2-inch board, that auger has a tendency to split that board before we begin drilling. We're at 2.5. I've never had that problem. Now this isn't quite 2.5, but it's just like a 1/16 off. So it's very nearly 2.5. So this will work well. So all we do, of course, is we're just going to eyeball it. It doesn't really matter. And drill a hole. Now, we're going to drill it most of the way through, and then on the back side, you see how it popped out there? Then we're just going to go ahead and drill it the rest of the way through from the back. Now, when you're using this type of bit, or this particular bit, it really chews up and makes a nasty hole. For our purpose, for this project, that's okay. We don't need a super clean hole, because you don't see that in the finished product. But I will say this, if you don't want to use that type of bit, a Forstner bit, 3/4 inch Forstner bit, if you don't know what a Forstner bit is, you can Google it, but it will give you a cleaner hole, but it doesn't drill near as fast. This thing is blazing fast. So time is money, of course, when you're doing custom woodworking. So in this case, we don't care that the hole is not perfect, because like I said, you don't see it in the finished product anyhow. So what I'll do is I'll go through and drill on the line, right in the center, with just eyeball it all the way down, flip it over, drill it from the back side, and then what I'll do is I'll come back with the miter saw and just cut everything. We'll cut them once it's all one piece. So I'll explain this all in more detail as we go, but let me get this whole strip done, and then we'll move on. All right, so now we've gone through and cut our holes, right? But now this board is too wide. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a 1/2 inch, roughly a 1/2 inch off of each side, and that will leave us with 1.5 inches wide. And that's more or less what we want. Doesn't have to be perfect, but that's more or less what we want. And then once we've done that, we've got all these holes are all kind of burred up. Lots of, they're all kind of burred up. So we're going to hit these with a sander on both sides, okay, and knock some of that stuff off of there. I just use 60 grit. And then we're just going to come in with our miter saw and just cut in between the holes, and that will make our donuts, okay? So let me go ahead and rip this through the table saw, and then we'll kind of move on. Well, we have a bunch of parts cut. We don't have all the parts cut for the tree. but we have about 90% of the parts. So first of all, let's take a gander at our donuts. There are our donuts. Now we do need a few more donuts than what you got there, but that will get us about 90% of the way. So this is where I think you really just got to have the plans. For $5, the frustration level will be certainly eased. And the big thing on the plans is the cut list. And that's very difficult to explain in the video, how to cut each one of these lengths out of what board. So you only wind up using 6 fence pickets. But let me tell you the formula. If you just don't want to buy the plans, let me tell you the formula. So what we did here is the widest portion of the tree, the first board, is 24 inches long, okay? And then every sequential board after that is 5/8 of an inch less. So it starts at 24, then it goes down 5/8 of an inch, 5/8 of an inch, 5/8 of an inch for each successive board. So there'd be some arithmetic for you there, but that's the formula that I used. Everything starts at 24, and then every successive board up the tree is 5/8 of an inch shorter than the last. So I've already done all that math for you in the plans, but if you don't want the plans, that's what you got to do, okay? The other critical thing is that every 4 boards is a different width. So the bottom boards, there's 4 boards that are 4, 4 that are 3.5, 4 that are 3, 4 that are 2.5, 4 that are 2, and then the rest are 1.5 inches, all the way up the tree. So 1.5 inches, there are more than 4 boards. Now, when we're cutting our lengths, so the first 4 here are 4 inches wide. Okay, but remember I said the next set is only 3.5. But if you look here, these boards were cut. 2 of them are 4 and 2 are 3.5. So what we have to do is we have to rip these down to be 3.5. And then we wind up with the same situation here where we have 3 of our boards are 3 and 1 that's 3.5. Okay, and that's because we cut it out of that 3.5 inch picket. So again, this one has to be cut down to 3 inches wide. Now all of these are 3 inches here, but I don't know what we did here. I think we got off a little bit here. I got my kids helping me, but so yes, so it should be stacks of 4. This one's a stack of 3. So I guess that's supposed to be like that. And then we'll have to have this one like that. Okay. So, anyhow, so 4, 3.5, 3, 2.5. These are supposed to be 2, but they're 2.5. Well, why are they 2.5? They're not supposed to be 2.5. Well, the reason that this is 2.5 is because we have to drill our hole. And remember what I said previously, if the board is less than 2.5 inches wide, if this was 2 and we tried to drill through it, we'd probably split the wood. So we'll go ahead and drill our hole here in the middle, and then we'll take a 1/4 inch off each side, and that will give us a 2 inch wide board. Okay, and now on our 1.5 pieces, we'll drill our hole, and then we'll take a 1/2 inch off each side, and that will give us 1.5 inch boards. So I hope that makes some sense. I know it can be a little bit confusing, so maybe rewatch this section. So remember, we gotta rip these down to 3.5. We gotta rip that one down to 3. Pretty basic stuff. Start at 24, 5/8 of an inch less for every single board going up the way. All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and rip these down to the proper width, get that much done, and then I'm going to go ahead and drill all my center holes in these pieces. I've got my kids that work with me, so once I have all my holes drilled and get everything ripped down, I'll have them come out and do all the sanding and finish work for me on this while I'm building the base. Okay. So let me go ahead and get all that work done, and then I want to talk to you one more thing here when I get set up for it, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. But I'll start getting these holes drilled and whatnot. Okay, so I'm going to try and explain my logic here. What we need to do is we need to find the center, top to bottom and left to right. I'm confident in my skills that I can eyeball center, top to bottom, pretty close. Okay, and it doesn't need to be super precise anyhow for what we're doing. So as long as we're within a, let's just say, 1/4 of an inch, we're golden. Now this particular board, as you can see, is basically 23 and a half, okay, for all intents and purposes. Now, we probably aren't going to be super good at math to know exactly what's half of 23 and a half, nor do we need to. So what we would do, I would just overhang it a little bit, see, on the 24 on both ends, and say, okay, and pretend it's 24, and then mark 12, okay, and that's close enough. Now, if you went like on a smaller piece here, okay, this one is 9. Well, we know that half of 9 is 4 and a half, but we could do the same. We could just say, hey, that's overhanging about the same, that's 10, and then we can mark it at 5, okay? So that's what I'll do as I go through each one of these. I'll just find a dimension that I can easily split in half, such as 14, and mark it at 7, okay? And so on and so forth. So it just needs to be approximately the center. It doesn't have to be dead center. But top to bottom is pretty easy when you get your drill bit there to guess about what's center, okay? So that's what I'm going to do through all these boards. Mark center on all of them, drill the center hole on all of them, and then I'll call the girls out and let them go crazy on the sanding. So now you can see we have all of our holes in all of our pieces. I did go ahead and rip these down to 2, and then all of these are ripped down to 1.5 wide. So we'll come back through and we'll get everything a nice sand, a little bit of a round over all the way around on all our parts. And then while they're doing that, I'll show you how we're going to put the base together. So that'll be our next step, putting the base together. So this is what our base will look like when it's all put together. This piece here is 14 inches long and it has a 45-degree bevel. And then this piece here, these two pieces are 7 1/8. And you can see I just have a 45-degree bevel, but it only goes half the distance of the board, where this one comes to a point, this one doesn't. Okay, so we're just taking a little nip off there. And then this piece here is 18 inches, and you can see we did the same little 45-degree there. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in 2 screws here, 2 screws here, and that will hold these two boards together. Then we'll put 2 screws here that will hold that whole assembly to that board. And then we're going to drill a 3/4 inch hole right down the middle. And then the distance from here to that outside edge, 7 1/8, okay? And, you know, it doesn't have to be exactly perfect, but that's what the plans call for. So pretty simple. Put this little base together, and then we can actually start assembling our tree. So let me get all that screwed together, and then I'll show you what that looks like when it's all put together. All right, it's starting to look like something. So what we did, of course, you could see how we screwed those pieces together, drilled our hole right dead in the center. Now that 3/4 inch hole leaves our pole just a bit wobbly. So what I did is I just put a screw on either side of it, and that tightens it up real nice. So then of course what you'll have to do almost in every case is you'll have to adjust that pole so it's perfectly straight up and down. I just do it by eye. Turn it around once you get one way, double check it, make sure it's more or less straight up and down. I mean, you could grab a carpenter square if you really wanted to, but I just eyeball it. Once we get all the pieces on, then we'll do a final, you know, make sure it stands straight up and down. So now that we've got all that done, now we're ready to start assembling our tree. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put on 12 donuts. So and then we just slide the donuts down the pole, and so that's our first step. 12 donuts before our first branch. All right, so there are our 12 donuts for the base, and now we're going to grab our first 4-inch branch and put it on. So we've already sanded the ends around to kind of rounded everything over, and then that branch will just get slid on there, just like so. Okay, so we'll continue with our branches all the way up. But so we put a branch, then a donut, then the next branch. Okay, so remember earlier when I was talking about when we were making our donuts, how it really wouldn't matter too much if the hole in the donut was a little bit tore up, because the reason being is the branch will cover the whole top of this donut. So you never see the top, and that the hole's a little bit janky. All right, so then we just keep going with the branches. I'll just demonstrate one more for you, and then you kind of get the idea. So that's the next branch, okay? And then again, we'll do the next donut, the next branch, and so on and so forth, all the way up the tree. But I won't bore you with that. I'll go ahead and get all the donuts and branches put on, and then we'll kind of show you what it looks like when we get to that point. All right, so that's what it looks like when it's all said and done. So what I usually do is I will cut the conduit flush with the top here with a cutoff wheel. You could leave it just a little long and drill you a little hole and put in a cotter key to hold all these pieces in place. I don't typically do that, so to me it's not that big a deal. And then what I do, just kind of finish this off. I have 6 inches exposed and 2 inches in here. This is just a little square piece that I make. And then that gives you some elevation if you're going to put on a traditional tree topper. Sometimes I'll just tie a little ribbon on and showcase it that way. So one other thing I wanted to point out is in the plans, we have all the marketing material for these. So if you want to build these for resale, I sell the 5-foot trees for $100. But we have them all the marketing materials. So you have in the plans how we list it on Facebook. So all of our description and details that we put in our Facebook postings, but also sample images of finished trees. Not only trees that I have for myself, but also trees that customers have sent me pictures of how they decorated it. And that goes with all of our plants. So even like our little lemonade stand here, if you buy the plants for it, we have all the marketing materials where it's all staged up, looking nice. And you're welcome to use those photographs that we give you with the plans for your own marketing purposes. Our little wheelbarrow, see how it's all staged up. We've got all the different greenery and stuff, and that is going to give you a much nicer presentation than if we just had the wheelbarrow there. Now we do also give you the pictures where we don't have any of that greenery, so you do get a picture of just the basic wheelbarrow, but also how a customer might stage it up for their porch or yard. So that is going to really help you, because you may not want to build a tree just to see if it would sell, but you have the finished product you can post on Facebook or wherever you might sell your goods, and then be able to sell off of those finished pictures. Okay, so that's it for this one. Again, I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.